welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really foundational idea.
Mm-hmm.
Basically that the landscape of our minds, our thoughts, directly shapes everything we actually accomplish. Or maybe stumble over.
Right. It's this core mechanism almost that influences whether you hit your goals or, well, get tripped up.
Exactly. So we're here to explore how this internal world, this thought world, sculpts our external reality.
And we're digging into the principles from the thought factor and achievement. We've pulled out what feel like the key insights.
Kind of the highlights.
Yeah, the most potent bits to give you a, let's say, more direct understanding of this whole dynamic. Think of it as a concentrated dose, maybe, but how your thinking affects, well, everything.
Okay, let's jump in then. The book starts with a pretty bold claim.
It does.
All that a man achieves, and all that he fails to achieve, is the direct result of his own thoughts. I mean, that doesn't really leave much room for excuses, does it?
No, it puts the responsibility squarely on the individual. What's fascinating is how it frames things like strength, weakness, even our inner sense of purity or impurity.
How so?
Well, it suggests they aren't just things we're stuck with or that happen to us. They're presented as like direct reflections of our own mental activity.
And crucially.
And crucially, something we alone have the power to change. That's the kicker.
Yeah, it's powerful. Maybe a bit unsettling even. It means we're not just, victims of circumstance.
Right. Our condition, whether we feel like we're suffering or experiencing happiness, it says it originates from within.
There's that line that really resonates. As he thinks, so he is. As he continues to think, so he remains.
Yeah.
It hits home how our consistent thought patterns kind of solidify our reality.
And if you take that idea into our interactions,
Yeah.
the text even looks at the dynamic between people who seem strong and those who seem weak. It suggests the quote-unquote weaker person has to actively engage in their own growth, step up.
Right. External help can only do so much.
Exactly. As it says, none but himself can alter his condition. It implies limits to outside intervention if the person isn't willing.
And it kind of reframes bigger issues too, doesn't it? Like the idea of an oppressor and oppressed.
Yeah, it proposes they're both, in a way, cooperators in ignorance, each contributing through their own mindset. It's a bit of a challenging perspective.
Definitely shifts the focus inward.
And it touches on this idea of perfect knowledge, love, and compassion, like a higher viewpoint that sees the underlying causes without judgment. But the main thrust is always back to the individual's internal state driving things.
Okay, so if our thoughts have that much power, how do we actually, make things better, create positive change?
The book's pretty straightforward on that. A man can only rise, conquer, and achieve by lifting up his thoughts. Simple as that.
And the flip side,
He can only remain weak and abject and miserable by refusing to lift up his thoughts. It's presented as a very direct link. Mindset equals outcome, basically.
what's interesting is how this applies even to, say, worldly success, material stuff.
Right. The text argues that even for those goals, you need self-control. You need to sacrifice what it calls slavish animal indulgence.
So like giving in to every little urge, procrastination, comfort.
Exactly. Those immediate desires that can just derail longer-term plans. The book suggests managing those impulses is actually essential for clear thinking, for planning effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's hard to build something solid if you're constantly chasing the next shiny object or the easiest path.
And the text points out that just giving in all the time actually stops us from developing our inner resources, our capacity to handle bigger things. We basically limit ourselves through undisciplined thought.
So there's a direct trade-off.
A very direct one, according to this. Choosing to elevate your thoughts, being more focused, more disciplined mentally, that directly strengthens your resolve, your self-reliance.
Which connects to that other key idea.
The sacrifice point. There can be no progress, no achievement without sacrifice. It really highlights that growth often means letting go of some immediate comfort or, lower impulses.
And it's not just about external wins, is it? The text links this whole process, lifting your thoughts to building character.
Yes, and to a deeper, more lasting kind of fulfillment. It even suggests the universe itself sort of favors positive qualities.
How's it put that?
It says the universe helps the honest, the magnanimous, the virtuous, which, echoes a lot of philosophical or spiritual teachings.
And it encourages you to actually test that.
Yeah, test it yourself by actively practicing virtuous thought. It's about aligning your inner world with these higher principles and seeing what happens.
Okay, so let's talk about different kinds of achievement. The book breaks down a bit. Intellectual stuff, for instance.
Right. It suggests those accomplishments come from sustained mental effort, thinking focused on knowledge or beauty or truth.
And it emphasizes it's usually not about quick ambition.
No, more about long, sometimes arduous dedication, a deep, persistent focus rather than just vanity.
And spiritually, same kind of idea.
Pretty much. Spiritual achievements are framed as the result of consistently dwelling on noble, lofty thoughts, thinking about things that are pure, selfless. The idea is this naturally leads to wisdom, better character, a positive influence.
So it really comes down to well thought, no matter the field.
Achievement of whatever kind is the crown of effort, the diadem of thought. That sums it up nicely. It all circles back to the quality and the direction of your mental energy.
And it lists those key ingredients again: self-control, resolution.
Purity, righteousness, well-directed thought, those lead upwards. The opposite qualities, well, they lead downwards. It's cause and effect.
But, and this feels important, there's a warning too.
Yes, a crucial one. It reminds us that even after you've climbed high, you can still fall if you let those negative thought patterns creep back in.
So it requires ongoing effort, vigilance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Victories attained by right thought can only be maintained by watchfulness. That's a really key takeaway. Complacency is dangerous.
The idea that once you've made it, you can just coast.
Yeah, the book warns against that. That's often when things can start to unravel, apparently, when you let your mental guard down.
And this principle, it applies everywhere.
It reiterates that, yes, business, intellect, spiritual life, lasting success is always the product of definitely directed thought. The rules don't change based on the goal.
Okay. And the book wraps up with a very direct link between ambition and, well, what it costs.
Yeah, the level of sacrifice required, it states it plainly. He who would accomplish little must sacrifice little. He who would achieve much must sacrifice much. He who would attain highly must sacrifice greatly.
It's a clear equation, isn't it? Bigger dreams require bigger commitment, more self-discipline.
Exactly. So the core message we're left with is incredibly empowering, really.
Nels?
Because our thoughts aren't just passively watching reality, they are the active forces. They're shaping our achievements and our setbacks.
Yeah.
Knowing that gives you, well, a sense of agency, control.
Right, it puts you back in the driver's seat. It really underscores how vital it is to consciously guide your thoughts, practice that self-mastery.
And be willing to make those necessary sacrifices to, rise wherever you want to rise.
So this leads to a really practical question for you, the listener.
Mm-hmm.
Think about one area in your life right now where you're aiming for something more. Improvement, a goal, anything.
You can ask yourself, what are the dominant thoughts you typically hold about that area? Are they lifted, focused, or are they maybe holding you back?
How might consciously, intentionally focusing and elevating those thoughts actually create a completely different outcome?
It's about really getting your head around the power of this thought factor, seeing how it's playing out in your own journey of learning, growing.
And ultimately achieving. Thanks for exploring this deep dive with us.